So here we go. So let's take a look at a couple radiographs and then get cracking into the treatment. So this is the final. Actually, I'll just give you the bottom line up front. This is the final radiograph we did place in the part 2 of this video. We're going to talk about post placement. We're going to actually do a backfill. We'll do a down pack and a backfill technique with these really cool 18th new instruments that they sent to me to trial, and actually I'll show you, give my review on those. And you can see this tooth is an abutment to a Maryland bridge. And you know, guess how old this Maryland bridge is? 13 years old. I couldn't believe it. But then I looked at his bite and it's not contacting at all. That's why it survived. So we have a 2-canal premolar. In the preoperative radiograph, actually, what's really interesting is I thought there might have been 3 canals or a rotated tooth. So if we take a look here, this is a tooth here, tooth number 1-4, and let's just take a look. We've got, say, it's very subjective, 20 to 30% bone loss. And I think the reason why, the reason you really got to look, what I've been trained is to look for the reason why this tooth became necrotic. Because the diagnosis of this tooth number 1-4 or tooth number 5, is necrotic with normal apical tissues. And I think the reason, so we don't see any lesion, we don't see any large restorations, but I think the reason why is we had bacterial invasion of the pulp chamber from the abfraction lesion on the other side. And unfortunately, my microscope, I didn't take an image of that, but there is a fairly decent sized abfraction abrasion lesion on the buccal side of this. So that's kind of the first up thing we're looking for. Why did this tooth become necrotic? And the second is you can kind of see that it's a little bit rotated, because you kind of see there's the potentially the invagination of the meso part of the root, or if it's another root PDL entirely. It's hard to tell unless we had a 3D image. But one of the things you got to look for is this. You see how the pulp chamber kind of goes towards the distal? And I was kind of thinking up front, like, wow, you know what? Maybe these are 3 canals, 2 buccals. Maybe that's a PDL there. Maybe that's a PDL there, and definitely there's a PDL there. But it turns out it wasn't. But it's something to look for. How do you confirm? Well, you could send for a cone beam as well, and then you know exactly what the configuration is. So we don't have a cone beam in-house. It has to go downtown. So what we'll do is we'll use a scope. So we'll check for these, if there's any anomaly during the procedure, then we will send for a cone beam. Otherwise, off we go. So let's take a look and talk about kind of how to unblock the canals that you block. And it happens to us all. So here we are. You can see there's the retainer for that Maryland bridge. And there's the bridge there, the Pontic. So what I'm going to be doing is I'm taking a number 2 long surgical round burr, and I'm literally just making, because there's no restorations, I don't have that to guide me, but I'm just honestly making my access preparation between the 2 cusps, just a perfect line, back and forth, back and forth. And what I'm going to do is Deutsche Musikant several years ago did an article talking about how deep this pulp chamber usually is, and it's honestly, on average, the pulp chamber is in premolars 7 millimeters. So this little line here on my burr, so from this line to the tip of the burr is 6 millimeters. So I'm using that as a gauge to see how deep I'm going. So there are 3 things that are going through my mind while I'm doing this. One is, don't go too far buccal-lingually. 2, make sure that the angulation of this burr is correct along the long axis of the tooth. And then 3 is just the depth. And I use this little mark as the depth guide on my burr. So I dropped in, because it is a fairly large pulp chamber, as you can see here, so I'm not too concerned about missing it, but I have done that before. So we dropped in, and you can see here, we're a little bit more to the mesial than I'd like, so there you go. But it's probably a pulp chamber that's going to open up, and then you can see the top of the pulp horn here. So this is a necrotic tooth because we're not getting any hemorrhage, or even irreversibly inflamed teeth don't hemorrhage that much, but this one's fairly necrotic, and it confirms our pulpal diagnosis. So what I'm going to do now is I'm taking a long shank, slow round burr, and I'm just going to open that up, just to open up the axis cavity. So this is called a Muntz burr. But I wasn't, normally what I'll do, I wasn't happy with kind of the way it was going, so I was like, I'm going to use my Endo Z burr, so it's a high-speed burr, non-cutting tip, just to open it up a little more buccal lingually. But unfortunately, I wasn't happy with this. It opened up a little too much mesially. Is it the end of the world? Definitely not. So what that burr does is it goes into that little spot that I opened up right here, and I'll go back and forth and open that chamber up. But I wasn't happy with it, so what I did was I elected to go back to that slow round burr and open up. You can see how it opened up a little bit too much more, the mesial. I mean, look at the bigger picture. It's not that big, but we're trying to do our best. So we're going to irrigate all that debris out. And then what I'm going to do is, because this is a premolar, and I'm still suspecting 3 canals, I'm going to use my Wave 1 Gold small file to use an orifice opener. So this is a 20 tip with an 0.7 taper at the apical 3 millimeters, and I'm just going to use that to open up the coronal third, the coronal 2/3 in this case. And then what I'm going to do, so that opens up the coronal 2/3 of the canal, and then I'm going to find my working length. So after successful use of a 6/8/10, I'm going to skip that part because that's not that critical. I was able to get my working length, and using this really cool, I've been using this for 3 months now, and it is amazing. It goes right here, this 18th Airpex. They sent it to me to trial, and I've changed the apex locators I've used, and I've compared this with the gold standard, the Root ZX2 and the Root ZX. It's the same point. This is actually a hair longer than what Dr. Ricucci has talked about, and I've used that now in my cases, and I absolutely love it. So what I'm going to do here is, because I do have a basic glide path, it's not huge. I kind of shortcutted my glide path a little bit. But what I'm using here, a glide path is, so this is my palatal canal. So let me go back there just a little bit. So I've opened up my glide path with a number 10 file. It's not, it's not a huge glide path opening in terms of, I wasn't doing this technique called smoothies for, say 30 seconds to a minute. And this is what caused me the problem. I shortcutted my glide path preparation. I went with my 2007 to try to recreate that glide path, reinforce it. So I was able to get to length on my palatal canal. So that's what we're going down here. So what I'm doing there is I'm looking actually at where's my file cutting in the canal. And you can see I'm fully covered in canal debris, and that's a great, it's a good or bad thing. It doesn't really matter. But the critical thing that I want to really talk about right here is making sure that after 3 strokes, that's from Real World Endo, and I really love it. I'll do 3 strokes of the file, pull the file out, and clean it. This file is not cutting anything, and really you're increasing the probability of fracturing this file, because this dentin debris, it doesn't cut. Now what it's doing is it's rubbing the walls and increases, it's an increasing friction on that file, and the probability of breaking this file increases with debris in the flutes. Plus it's not, again, it's not doing anything. So clean it off. That's what we're going to do here. We clean it off. And then I'm going to tackle into my buccal canal. And right there you can see, so now I'm using the Wave 1 Gold medium. I've skipped the other process, and I wanted to get to this point. This file is not progressing to my working length. You can see it's cutting in the apical third, but it's not going anywhere. We've hit the end of the road. And this is exactly what's going through my mind. It's like what my dental assistant does. We talk about the internal scream. That file's not going to, it's not going to length. You're like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do on this? And when I was brand new, what I would do is I'd take a 10 file and jam it and try to force my way to the end. Well, I'm here to tell you, you don't need to do that. You don't need to get worried. What you can do to start, and this is only what this video talks about, it's really simple, is just do the 6/8/10 procedure. And I'm going to run this part of the video all the way through. So this video is a little bit longer because I really wanted to capture how this procedure works. So what I'm doing is I'm taking a 6 file, and when I talk about getting a bite, so there's the girl with the apple, you can see I'm really taking a bite So I'm doing a little clockwise turn into that canal. I'm getting a little bit of bite, and imagine that bite is kind of like biting into an apple. So it's kind of like you get a little anchoring point and you can take a bite. So I'm taking a little bite and then I'm pulling back. I'm turning the file clockwise because that's the way it spins, is clockwise, and then I'm getting a bite and then pulling. I'm not forcing. If you don't feel that little bite, but you feel, imagine you have a bolt and you're biting down on teeth. Imagine you have a bolt in your mouth and you're biting down on that bolt. Well, and there's nothing, there's no little bite. Well, then you probably ledge the case and you're trying to crack into dentin and you're not going anywhere. So this technique will not work if you're getting this type of feeling. But if you're getting this type of feeling, you can sink into a little bit, this technique will work. And we can talk about ledge. There's lots of videos online about ledging, but this unblocking technique is huge and it only takes a few minutes. So what we're going to do is we're going to do 3 to 4 rounds of that little biting with a 6 file. Then we're going to go to an 8 file. And what I want you to watch is not so much where the stopper is, because it's kind of random right now. I don't place it. I mean, I guess I could. Really look at where the shank of the file meets the handle in terms of depth. So I'm slowly taking little bites and I'm just opening up the canal more and more and more. So I'll do 3 to 4 little bites with a successful file, 6, 8, 10, and I'm going to go back to a 6 file. So what I'm doing there is I'm going to pull it out, and then I'm pulling the file, kind of rinsing. What I'm trying to do is what Dr. Ruddle has talked about, is buttering the file with some sodium hypochlorite in this case, and get a little more irrigant down into where that little hole is, little pilot hole. And I'm also emptying if there's any debris in the apical third of these flutes. When I do that bite, I'm just emptying them into the irrigant that's down that canal. I'm not using RC Prep because, in my opinion, RC Prep is a paste, a gel, any of those types of things, and they're not going to the apex. I've done these on extracted teeth. The only thing is really hard to stop when you have a leak is if you have a water leak in your house, it's really hard to stop that. And I compare that to getting fluid down to the apical third of this canal. It's really hard to stop any type of liquid from getting anywhere. So again, I'm just talking over this, but it's a 6, 8, 10 technique, and I really wanted to show you it doesn't take long. It took about 3 minutes. I'm not doing a lot of forcing, and you can see now I'm getting a really good bite. I'm getting back into getting past that blockage. I'm going to try my apex locator. I couldn't tell you if I'm long, short, or wherever, but the point is that we're getting back down, and there's nothing to worry about. And definitely don't jam another rotary file down until you have a great glide path. So again, we're doing a 6, 8, 10 file. There's a little bit of a kink on that file. I wasn't happy with that, but it's not the end of the world. So you can see now how close we're getting to getting out the end. And in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to ensure that we have patency, and I'm going past. It's not ideal according to the great evidence that Dr. Ricucci talks about. So here what I did was I skipped the 8 file, and you can see from a 6 to, and I'm going to go back to the 8 because it just doesn't work. It's not as effective as going the right progression. So 6, 8, 10. So clockwise turn, pull, bite, bite, pull, bite, pull. There's just a little bit of a little tug there, and now we're making our way past that blockage. Because essentially what I did was I rammed a whole bunch of dentin debris into that apical constriction, and now I gotta make my way through it. So now we're down to length. Probably we're past it. I'm gonna make sure we're past it. Taking a 10 file 2 millimeters out the apex is not going to. It's not the end of the world. So that's a smooth glide path right there. You saw what I was able to do right there. This is what I would consider a beautiful loosey-goosey glide path. File goes up and down, nice and smooth. It's not binding whatsoever. So I'm going to take my 10 file, do the same thing. Again, that is a glide path right there. Smooth glide path. I'm going to make sure that there's no little bumps or anything in the way. I'm gone out the end. a millimeter or two. Actually, it's half a millimeter. I'm going to reconfirm in my palette. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my wave one gold and go to my working length. And that's it. So then what we're going to do is we're going to irrigate. You could irrigate all the way through that process. I find that it's not that necessary because my pulp chamber is full of irrigant. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my wave one gold primary right to working length. And boom. So what I'm doing there is I'm looking at where my flutes are cutting on the apical third of my file. So then what we're doing is we check for debris, and then we're going to continue down the road of lots of irrigation. So now we've bypassed that block. There's not really much to bypass, but we've gotten through it. That's probably the better way to do it. Better way to talk about it. We've gotten through the block using its simple 6-8-10 technique. We've established our glide path, and now we're going to continue with our life and get this root canal over with. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to open that up to 3506, and you can see here that my 3506 medium is going to working length, which I'm happy about. So that's great. We're going to irrigate a significant amount, and that's really what is going to solve this case. It's not only doing the mechanical shaping, but it's a chemical clean. And then I'm a huge believer in ultrasonic or sonic. It's really simple. Unfortunately, I'm not getting paid by Dentistry. I wish I was, but I'm not. But I use the activator, and this sonic device is it's simple. And the reason why I love it is because these are cheap, and it's really tough to break those nylon tips. There's the Eddy from VDW. I'm going to be trying that out down the road. That's another great opportunity, another simple technique to use. So I'm going to do sonication in both palatal and buccal canals. Lots more rinse, more irrigation. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to fit my cones. So during the cone fitting procedure, what I'm doing is I'm going to place my cones at working length. We're using a single cone technique with BC sealer. When I seat it, I'm going to pinch. I'm going to give this a really good pinch, and that'll engrave my cotton forceps into the gutta percha. And then when I go to place my comb back, I know exactly where it is if it's at length. So I'm going to fit both canals, and then we're going to dry with paper points. I am using a paper point technique. There's a video online that I put up about how to use this to ensure that you're at entire working length. Take a look at it there. It turns out this tooth only has 2 canals, palatal and buccal. So we're just going to do so right there was a technique of checking to see if where my paper point is dry or wet, and then I'm going to measure that just to make sure we're at length. So right there what I was doing is I was determining whether or not we need a post. So I think it's, there's no right answer in here, but there was a large abfraction lesion, and you can see right there the light coming through the buccal part of this. And actually I was asking Angela if she could see my Explorer through the screen, because this video gets played through the screen through my computer, and I'm really looking intraorally. There you can see my Explorer. Watch it right here. So I'm looking to see if I can see, you can see the shadowing of my Explorer. That's really what I'm doing. Because I'm trying to determine whether we need to put a post in this tooth or not. You could argue left, right, and center whether you need a post or not, but I was like, you know what, that dentin is pretty thin. And you can see it right here. There's a bit of an abrasion lesion right there all the way around. So I'm like, you know what, let's just put a post in. It's not going to hurt anything. I'm using endosequence posts. The diameter of these posts is no larger than my actual preparation of the canal. So we're going to show you in the next video the simple technique I do to place the post. So we're going to place our BC sealer, and then what I do is just before I put my cone in, I'm going to score it. And this is a really cool technique that I learned. This is a really long canal. It's 23 millimeters. I don't need to get a 17 millimeter post down there. I'm going to leave a 7 millimeter plug. So really what I'm doing is I'm scoring the gutta percha, and because this is BC sealer, It's a single cone technique. All I need to do is place this cone down, take a working length, and then if I'm happy with my working length shot, I'm going to twist the top of this off and leave my apical plug in there. So that's a great technique. So before we put our gutta perches in, when you place your BC sealer in here, there's going to be an air bubble underneath this BC sealer. So what I've found is I'm going to take a number 10 file to length. I'm going to burst that air bubble because sometimes I find it's just enough to keep my cone from seating all the way down. And then I'm going to place, this is going into the palatal canal. I'm going to take my working length radiograph, and then at the next video I'll show you what we do to make our post space. So that's really what we're doing, is creating our post space. Now we placed our buccal gutta percha, and you can see these have both gone to length. I can check quickly, visual verification. And the next stage is to take our working length radiograph. So I'm happy with that. And what I'm going to do now is we're going to finish this video here, and I'm going to see you in the next video about obturating and placing this fiber post. So thanks so much for joining me, and we'll talk to you soon. Cheers.